Thank you, everybody, for coming to this really fantastic, informative lunch. And we're continuing a great day of trainings and meetings and everything ahead of our big business meeting tomorrow. I am so excited about our next speaker. She is an incredible political strategist, political scientist. She's been featured in major media outlets all over the country. Her new book, which we're going to hear about, is called Hit 'em Where It Hurts: How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game. And it modernizes how Democrats compete for power against a well-organized, well-funded Republican Party noise machine. DNC Chair Jamie Harrison describes the book as straight up with no chaser, and anyone knows Rachel, that is exactly how I would describe her. This book is a must-read for any Democratic Party official or consultant. Rachel Bitcofer has her fingers on the pulse of how Democratic Party campaigns must evolve to respond forcefully to this era of hyper-partisanship. To protect democracy and elect pro-democracy candidates, we must go on the offense. And this book is the guide for just that. So it's going to be a fantastic hour. We're so excited for y'all being here. And welcome to the stage, Rachel Bitcofer.
It's not on. Oh, there you go. I'm going to make Shasti take a selfie with you guys all in it, and we can post it to the internet and show people that Washington Dems are here to play. Going to turn on. There we go. Hi, Washington Democrats. Woo! Oh, I'm so pleased to be invited here to talk to you guys about democratic electioneering strategy and the shift that we're making. We started making in 2022 and are still pushing hard for 2024 so that we can save democracy by beating Republicans at their own game. And I have a wonderful presentation. There you go. It's up there now. Green button. Hold on. Technical problem. Good? There we go. All right. So what this book does is 3 parts, and we're really not going to be able to get into the third part where I teach the techniques, the practical applications. I do want to tell you I'm doing online trainings for that, and you can sign up and do that. But the first part of the book is probably the most important for you guys to digest along with your boxed lunches. And that is bringing you guys up to speed with some important knowledge from my discipline. I have a PhD in poli-sci. My specialty was American voter behavior, campaigns, and elections. And believe it or not, I'm modernizing democratic electioneering strategy with 2 findings from that literature that never quite made it into, election analysis, electioneering land. One of them is that the public doesn't know anything about government except for maybe who the president is, okay? And that was an astounding finding, right? And then the second thing is that partisanship dictates the vote choice for almost everybody, including most of the people who describe themselves as political independents, okay? So we're going to be talking quite a bit about that today. It's going to be heavily focused on. And then I'm going to talk a bit about negative partisanship strategy, what that is, how it works, where it was deployed in 2022 and was very effective. And again, on that last part of the book is the practical hands-on stuff. I call it the art of electoral war. Right? I'm trying to teach a bunch of nice liberals to be mean. It's not very easy to do. So I give you real tangible tools you can use to create your own messaging and be an effective communicator on behalf of the party's brand, which is ultimately what the strategic shift is all about. So I alluded to this fact that in the 50s, the political science, surveys are invented. So now we're all polling addicts. It's like crack and cocaine. People are like, poll, right? But when surveys were first invented, nerds like me were sitting around some academic department at Columbia, and they're like, you know what would be cool? Let's do a survey and find out what Americans know about government, okay? Because, we didn't really know. So they fielded the survey and they get the results. And the results are absolutely stunning, because what they find out is that actually most Americans don't know anything about the government. They know who the president is. They might be able to tell you the three branches of government, legislative, executive, judicial, but not articulate what that actually means. They know they have a separation of power system, but they can't describe how that functions at all, right? And then the political scientists write in the book, because this is my first graduate seminar class, right? And they were, don't worry, because the people have a cheat code that they can use to determine who they're going to vote for. And that cheat code is the party label. And they go on to write, wouldn't it be great if we had two parties that were so distinct and different that people could easily sort which one they want to belong to, right? And, obviously that's what we have exactly right now, and it's killing America, right? So be careful what you wish for. I can't, in a general book, spend 300 pages quantitatively demonstrating how tuned out and civically unaware our people were walking by on the street, at the grocery store, at the mall, running into at the PTA, whatever, right? How civically illiterate they are. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with interest. And so, I always ask people, think about something you're not interested in. Okay. Now, in this room, I'm guessing there's not a lot of interest in WWE wrestling. Okay. Maybe there's somebody in here. Okay. But other than that, there's very few people in here. So if I asked you guys to name a couple of wrestlers, you would be at a loss. You'd be like, who? I don't know. Mike Johnson. Isn't that guy a basketball player? Okay. That's how our people, our constituents, our voters, the people we have to galvanize to save democracy this fall, that's how their base of knowledge is for the stuff we know so well. So if you are a person that watched the motion to vacate, I want you to imagine going to Kroger or Albertsons or whatever after the debate, and you walking in, you take your cart and you see some guy walking by and you're like, dude, did you just see that motion to vacate? The guy would be like, huh? Right? Now, you could do that for the NBA finals or for the NFL or something like that, but you cannot go and converse about, even things that aren't that wonky, like the filibuster, right? You can't go and have conversations about that with general people. And now, it's always been the case. I just told you that from the 1950s, this finding comes. But as you can see in this graph, the digital age has completely altered how humans consume information. And the reason why is about choice structure. So I'm older than I look, so I've lived two worlds, pre and post the digital era. And in the pre-digital era, information came to you even if you didn't really want to see it, right? It would be on the front pages of the newspaper machines, which blanketed almost every corner. It would be, opened up in the diner where you would all actually be talking to the people you came to dinner with because you like them and want to talk to them and you didn't have a personal device to go lose yourself into. Everyone watched a common information stream on television. Cable was choice, right? But still very limited choice. And so people saw commercials, they saw news breaks in, the Iran hostages have been released. They would come in and see that. Nowadays, if you want to catch the average American, you have one opportunity to do it, and that's the Super Bowl halftime interview that the president unfortunately passed up on. This debate that's coming up is going to be unprecedented because it's not in the fall. And as much as we keep thinking about how this election is winding down, average people have not even started it yet, okay? So for them, it's just beginning, and it's never really began prior to Labor Day. So I'm not sure exactly when the cycle is going to begin because that first debate is so early, but I won't be surprised if the debate audience is quite down from what we would see in the fall. We'll see. And so it's even worse when you look at it by age. It's for people who are under 30, it's about 7% watching news. Think about that, 7% watching the news. How does that translate? Project 2025, how many people in here before I just said the words Project 2025 had heard of Project 2025? Okay, that is progress, folks, okay? Because 8 months ago, it would have been maybe 1 or 2 hands and only journalists, okay? So we're pounding it really hard, trying to get it on the radar. Hopefully the president's gonna make this a point at the debate. But even with 8 months, or really this was taken about a couple months ago, 6 months of that pounding, you can see how few average Americans have ever heard of it, okay? And we have to keep talking about that to get it up into the top level awareness. So having John Oliver pick up the story, you got to get it off of cable news. Nobody watches cable news. I've alluded to the fact that voters don't know anything, right? They do not know, if you asked America to name a judge, it would not be Justice Thomas. It would be Judge Judy. Okay? And it's funny because it's true. Okay, I swear to you, if I ran that poll, that's exactly what I would find, okay? So like getting people to make this transition where you stop knowing everything that you know and then imagine what you would know and how you would feel if you didn't know any of those things is probably the most important part of this work that I'm doing. Because people don't know anything, the writers of the American Voter pointed out, look, it doesn't matter because they have a shortcut that they can use. That shortcut is so profoundly powerful that although the media commentariat, because a lot of the people who do election analysis are not trained in elections, right? Or maybe they're practitioners or they covered it as a journalist, but they haven't studied it systemically. Most independents are not independent, and political science figured this out a long time ago. Now when I do a poll, I ask people who say they're independent, do you lean towards the Republican Party or the Democratic Party? And if they say they lean, they get sorted right into the Republican or Democratic bucket. And the reason pollsters started doing that, folks, is because their behavior, their vote choice, their issue positions, no different than out of the closet partisans, okay? So what that does is it means that our independent or swing bucket is very, very narrow. Of what we call pure independence. And also, those are folks that were socialized into voting, into the civic responsibility of voting, but don't have any of the passion or interest that we have that forces them to lean one way or the other. What I mean to say is, as I told Desi Leidick for The Daily Show, I did a skit with them once about their focus panel of swing voters, of undecideds. And I'm like, none of them are undecided. Go ask them. And she did. And they're all like, yeah, I know who I'm voting for. It was really funny. But anyway, so we have this very small band in a swing contest, like, let's say Michigan or Arizona, of people who are pure independents, and what moves them is top-line narrative, right? Right now, that top-line narrative before the election starts and over the time that Joe Biden has been president is that Joe Biden is old and has dementia because Republicans have been so effective at flooding the zone, and they have their media system, as I point out. They use our media system to their benefit as well in the book. So top-level awareness in that bucket becomes very, very important, okay? And we're gonna come back to that in just a minute. Just to show you guys what that means when I say that you can sort leaners into a party camp and predict how they're gonna vote. This is just a graph I made that shows in 2020, the percent of Democrats that voted for Biden, the percent of Republicans that voted for Trump, the percent of Democrats that voted for Herschel Walker, who, by the way, was the most flawed Republican nominee you could have because he paid for abortions on top of all the other issues he had. That's like the cardinal sin, right? And yet you can see 96, 95% of Republicans and leaners voted still for Herschel Walker, okay? The reason Warnock won was because the Democrats, of course, did the same thing, and then the independents broke for the Rev. So that's what that means. And what's remarkable is that we have developed an electioneering system that completely ignores that reality. Because if you've done a lot of door knocking, especially in like swing races or lean red, you've probably been instructed either directly, explicitly, or through the copy you're given for your field kit to minimize your candidate's belonging to the Democratic Party. Right? Don't mention he's a Democrat. Don't mention Democrats. Don't mention Republicans, right? So what we've been building over the course of 3 decades is something that fundamentally runs up against the core operational way that people make their vote decision. Republicans figured that out, and they started to insert partisanship in to their messaging. Starting in the mid-2000s, I talk about the Swift Vote Veterans for Truth campaign, okay? And it's so important for you guys if you're old enough to remember that John Kerry was a Vietnam War hero, okay? Had gone and rescued people on a boat. What Republicans did through a super PAC, this is the beginning of super PAC life, is instead of going to the swing bucket, that pure independent pool, and saying, George W. Bush is great, he's gonna lower your taxes, he's gonna privatize social, whatever the heck it is, they went and said, don't vote for John Kerry because John Kerry is a stolen valor, traitor. That's what the message of the Swift Vote Veterans of Truth was, okay? And so I want you to think about that, because when I talk about what I'm doing for the party, it's not up here in the branches where a lot of the work on messaging and whatever is occurring, right? What I'm saying is, no. Our problems aren't up here. Our problems are down in the roots in the soil. We have planted a tree on a flawed assumption. That flawed assumption is that the American voter is informed and engaged. The American voter is the exact opposite of informed and engaged. And because of that, they're very sensitive to propaganda, like Joe Biden is old and has dementia, because they're not going to go read the New York Times, okay? And when you have no base of knowledge, which is why we have this increasing education divide, when you don't have a strong basis of knowledge, you're just much more susceptible to like easy solution sounding stuff and the things that propaganda does. So what is negative partisanship, right? Well, I describe it this way, right? When you look at the picture of the Supreme Court, that hot rage that flares up inside of you, that is negative partisanship, okay? It's grounded in your own partisanship, this is true, which is built on things like belief in equality and diversity and human rights or whatever it might be. But because we have this very unique two-party system, because we have a very unique two-party system in which the electorate doesn't vote at 80, 90, 100% like our EU friends, it is literally half of American adults, okay? Like we got over that hump a bit in 2020, it went up to 63, unprecedentedly high turnout. But you have to think about what that means when you're walking around a mall. It means half of the adults you pass don't even bother to vote in presidential elections, right? I mean, that's stunning. So because we have this two-party system, we have both positive and negative partisanship, the fear, the threat, the hate, the loss that is happening when the other party is doing stuff to you, like stealing your bodily autonomy from you, right? All right. So, they did say there's something down here. So our traditional strategy has evolved and the Republicans, to be fair, did this as well when the electorate was very much in flux in the 80s and 90s as the southern wing of the Democratic Party collapsed after the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act. And you guys know the South is now a Republican stronghold, right? Same people, not literally, but same, demo, white Southern conservatives, now in the opposite party, and that party stands for states' rights and what have you, right? So at a time period that there was just a lot of what we call ideological heterogeneity. So there were liberal Republicans and there were conservative Democrats, and they would come together to do things like pass the VRA or whatever, right? But nowadays we have liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans, if you can call that conservatism, right? And there's not a lot of swing races because of gerrymandering, which you guys are very familiar with. So, we think about how we would win in 1992 with Bill Clinton. It was, I feel your pain. A lot of Southern whites voted for him. It's the last Democrat that they ever voted for, basically. And there was just a large pool of people to pull that out of. Once polarization set in because we had these two distinct parties, then the way to election year shifted, and Republicans were first on the wave of this. The reason that I have this expertise and I'm doing this job now is I was a professor and I taught campaigns and elections, and I would anthropologically dissect the way that Republicans and Democrats operate asymmetrically in terms of messaging and strategy and technique. Republicans abandoned this idea that you have to have two-bucket voter universe, and this should sound familiar to you guys. A mobilization bucket of hardcore Democrats, and you just have to make sure they show up and bother to vote. And then this persuasion poll in which we're going to win them over with a better product. And we always have a better product now, okay? I mean, back in the days, maybe not so much, but now product A is much better than product B. And we run, Val Demings in Florida, ex-sheriff, rides a motorcycle, look at her bio. She's going to get things done for you. She's going to work bipartisan across the aisle. And that's what we're trying to do, is sell A, okay? Meanwhile, what Ron DeSantis is doing is he's trying to make sure you don't buy B. Don't vote for Val Demings. She's a socialist. She wants to turn your male children into girls. She wants the brown people to come and invade you and steal all your stuff. I mean, I'm not kidding, right? That is what they say, and that is why I'm standing here today, and we're sitting here 4 months from the collapse of democracy, right? Because that is literally what they tell people. And what they understand is that small band of pure independents can be moved on that kind of messaging much more effectively than trying to get them to buy a product they have no interest in, and they already view all politicians as corrupt, okay? So Republicans make that shift. What this work is about is getting us to do so too, to get these swing races in particular, to stop doing this two-bucket model and look at places like Michigan in 2022, where we ran one message in the Whitmer race. In fact, all three of the big statewide ran this. It was about, my opponent is a MAGA extremist, and they're going to steal your right to control your own body, right? Freedom, not choice. Okay, we're not talking about going to a drive-through. We're talking about whether or not I'm going to die of a pregnancy complication, right? So we really want to make sure our language is conveying what that choice means, whether I will have economic freedom, right? And what that strategy does, what that message did, it accepts the assumption that I'm trying so hard to get people like you in this room to accept. People know nothing. So if I have a budget of 10 million and I'm running a race, I have to go into it going, okay, these people know nothing, so I need to tell them one thing. And that means I have to repeat that one thing ad nauseum, spend all the money on it, hammer it like CRT in Virginia. So when you read the book, you're going to see how I lay out how they do that, right? Glenn Youngkin doesn't give two shits about public education, right? He doesn't care at all about public education, let alone the curriculum that deals with slavery or segregation, okay? Glenn is a business guy. Glenn Youngkin cares about money, money, and money. But a strategist like me sat down with him and said, Glenn, you could run on that business background, or you could tell white people that Democrats want to make them feel bad about being white. And if you do that, and your attorney general does that, and the secretary of state does that, and all the state legislative races in 2021 do that, the media will treat it seriously and pick it up as a cacophony. And of course, we go in 10 months, I had never heard of CRT, and I'm like the person that knows literally everything, okay? Never had heard of it. Household name by November in Virginia, the #1 issue of the cycle. And so it's about understanding we are mixing two things together that necessarily shouldn't be mixed, okay? We're focused on designing campaigns that are representative, that encourage diversity, that are inclusive, that say pregnant women instead of pregnant people instead of pregnant women, that check all these boxes, okay? And when if I go into an RNC meeting to win Michigan, it's one strategic objective: maximize the probability of winning, period, okay? There's not, and do it with these vendors, do it with this kind of representation, make sure you talk about every issue under the sun, because we are not an ideological movement. This party is a group interest collaboration. Women's rights, gay rights, climate change, environmentalism, whatever it is, labor, it is all group interest oriented under this big tent party. And that has led us to want to, kind of micro down on the things that we're interested in. So we are messaging a ton on trees, but we've skipped the forest, the values forest, right? There's other people talking about values, right? That narrative forest has gotten stripped. And what I tell people is this, look, I want you guys to wedge the Dobbs decision and freedom. I want you to do it in Arizona where there's an initiative, in Florida where there's an initiative, but I want you to do it here in Washington State too. Because the complacency up here, if you think you're safe, if Donald Trump wins, is completely erroneous, okay? I've been studying the rise of the Third Reich. The Germans had federalism. They had all the things that we think we have. Parchment paper will only protect you when the people who control it decide to abide by it. Donald Trump, A, is willing to not abide by it. He's got the other thing he needs, which is a supporting cast, the Republican Party, right? So we know like that we're at this cusp. So I want everybody to run on freedom, threat to democracy, MAGA extremism. If you're going to accept that your voters know nothing, make sure in your swing races they know one thing. This guy or this girl, this Republican, MAGA is a MAGA extremist who's going to steal your freedom, right? And you have to bring it back into the forest, right? Instead of all these issues. Here's the good part, guys. If I run all these swing races on Roe and freedom, I can use the power I get with it to do other things like help the environment, protect unions, protect trans rights, whatever it is, okay? So we're conflating politicking with governing, and it has cost us a lot of winnable races when we should be picking one wedge issue, defining the Republican Party around it, and nailing them to the wall. One example, I can't play these videos, unfortunately, but you guys probably followed Tim Ryan's race in Ohio in 2022, about the time that the national media started writing glowing articles about how great his strategy was. If you follow me on Twitter, you would have said, I posted the article and I'm like, there's nothing, this is not new strategy. This is the thing that I was created to stop. Like, you are never gonna win if you're out there and your opponent's argument is, don't vote for Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan's a Democrat and all Democrats are bad. And then Tim Ryan's argument is, yeah, but I'm not one of those Democrats, right? So not only is that an ineffectual weakness, especially in that swing voter pool, which really like certainty, strongman certainty, okay? But it also is reinforcing their argument about us, that there's something inherently wrong with Democrats. Now, that wouldn't be so bad, guys, if we got the party identifications off the ballot. But if that party ID allows me to predict a year out who's going to win an election, which it does, I don't even need candidates, okay? Then obviously bleaching it out and ignoring it's bad. And so what we have is one side talking about how bad we are and another side that's either silent about the other side's bad things, not only silent about that, but in addition, reaffirming this idea that there's something inherently wrong with the Democratic Party. So in 2022, when we made the shift, it was not universal. I talk about in the book how we left 4 swing Senate races on the map in 2022, Ohio, Wisconsin, Florida, and North Carolina. I feel very proud about the work we did in 2022. On election night 2020, I knew we were gonna get hammered by this thing called the midterm effect, which is not something the media makes up. It's a real thing that, you get punished in the preceding midterm. And, my goal being, okay, how many Democrats can I get to not run the old strategy, right? And so it wasn't imperfect because I'm starting from zero. I didn't come up through the farm system of the Democratic Party. I don't know you guys. I'm coming from the outside. And if you think about my messages at its very core is, hi, this thing that you've been doing professionally for 20 years, you're doing it wrong. Okay, that's not exactly an easy message to go take to people and have them be receptive, but we did make progress. And right before Election Day, you guys will remember that the Republicans were flooding the zone with all those polls, right? And, the red wave's coming. And some of us were looking at other data points going, I don't really see the, 2010, red wave in this data, right? And the reason is because we ran and wedged Freedom and Roe in certain places. Freedom in particular in Arizona and the Adrian Fontes race down there. Adrian Fontes, his message to Republicans was, these MAGA extremists are not you. Join me and we will return to sanity. He didn't say, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not one of those Democrats, right? He went from a position of offense and made a case to de-aligning Republicans who are, there's a lot of college-educated, long-term suburban Republicans. This is why you guys are living in a blue place 20 years after 2002, okay? Realignment, de-alignment. But we have never gone in there and wedged their brand allegiance, right? So going in there and telling them, MAGA extremists are coming for your social security, your freedom, whatever it is, we haven't pushed them, right? They've kind of naturally articulated our way because they're like, ooh, those people look crazy and I don't want to be with them. But we need to do that next step, which is to sell the brand of the Democratic Party. Our brand up, their brand down, to put it into Donnie Dutch vernacular. We got hammered the last couple of weeks. Oh, Democrats aren't talking about the economy, they're gonna lose. Well, it didn't, none of my effects work, I'm sorry. Anyway, losers. Okay, it's supposed to be like that. Luckily, nobody pivoted that was already doing the right strategy, and we still won, and we beat back a midterm effect. What we want to make sure, though, is that, going forward, more and more people like you who have influence and access to other activists and grassroots people and other consultants and candidates and whoever, to understand how to make the transition of one message that both drives mobilizes your base, but also pushes swing voters to the Democrats and away from Republicans. It's a very different persuasion model, as I said. It's not selling, it's discounting the other choice, right? And one message does that. So if you think about how much you spend between content on all these various things, right? You save a ton of production, and distribution is really what matters on messaging. You can have the greatest message in the world, as I learned with Strike Pack, but if you don't have a distribution budget, no one will ever see the message, right? So we're spending a lot of time on testing and ads and all this stuff, and very little on getting it in front of the people that we need to move opinion for. So in the book, I talk about how important it is to ride for the brand. Now, it's very easy in Washington State to convince you guys of that. It's a lot harder to convince Democrats in Montana that actually the reason your state is shifting away from you is because you are not riding for the brand. You're letting people get wedged off the Democratic brand, and there's no one around to tell them different or to show them the alternative. Once people see what the Republican Party of today is all about, in their mind, it's low taxes, good on national security, okay? If you can see this in data all the time, then in their minds, it's good on taxes, national security, and we know that that's not the modern Republican Party at all. I mean, they're trying to give Eastern Europe to Putin, right? So we have to bring them up to speed on what they're doing when they vote. So, 40 million people in the Republican coalition are truly involved or affected so much by propaganda that they believe things that are flat out verifiably false. They believe the election was stolen by Joe Biden. They believe Joe Biden is a master of corruption and family dealing, right? But he's also demented and can't utter a sentence together. So keep those things straight. In this 40 million person pool, the COVID vaccine killed more people than COVID. Dr. Fauci is not a national hero. He should be in prison, okay? It's not just that they don't think Trump should be prosecuted or it's political or whatever. Their assertion is Donald Trump did nothing wrong, right? I mean, we all saw what he did, so nothing wrong. That's what we're against, but the other part of that coalition are leaners or swing voters that have a brand conception of Republicans that's outdated. And until and unless Democrats are adding partisanship into the messaging, it's going to be an advantage that we just don't share, right? And then, I talk about fascism. What people take, what I've learned, I should know, I'm a mom of a neurotypical autistic kid, so it really has opened my mind a lot to how people interpret what I say. And so I've learned to say, look, I'm telling you to run on freedom and fascism, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to say the word fascism, okay? You gotta talk about freedom and what the loss of democracy tangibly means to people. Losing Social Security, losing control of their own children. Do you want the government to decide for your daughter, or do you want to decide, right? When I tell people, look, the message should say, MAGA Republicans are medically torturing women. I would be very happy if you guys put up billboards that literally said that. That would be the greatest thing ever, because the audience, the voter pool is a 5th grade level rating, and 4 letters is good for them, okay? But my point is the message should convey that, okay? So what do? You show one of these women that have been life flighted out of Idaho into Washington because they're, almost died of a pregnancy complication, and you define the whole issue there. The takeaway then becomes Republican abortion bans torture women, but you didn't actually say that, right? So I want to make sure that, people understand that part. And then, it's also about leading people to the water. So what we do consistently is we've made things very popular on the left. As you guys know, progressives have a huge advantage on policy preferences, on guns, on climate, on minimum wage, you name it, pro-pot, whatever it is, gay rights. We've got this, the public is with us, okay? And we have done a really, really good job of pissing off young people about climate inaction and gun inaction. Because when we write, Congress didn't pass the bump stock ban today, we know that Republicans in Congress blocked it. They just think Congress sucks, okay? If you want them to blame Republicans, you have to say, Republicans won't let us keep our kids from getting slaughtered at school. Not Congress, not the Senate Republicans, right? So you have to be very, very explicit about who the enemy is. People do not magically know when I say NRA, what I actually mean is their tools in the Senate who are blocking any action on guns, right? So we have done a good job of getting people angry. The economy has helped us getting people angry, right, with inflation. They don't know who to be angry at. They know one politician, that's Joe Biden, so it begins and ends with him. If they're mad at inflation, they're mad at Joe Biden, right? What we need to do is this percolating angst that's going on, especially in our base of young progressives, is we need to aim it squarely at the problem. And that problem is the Republican Party, okay? That is the end of the day. We can pass guns and climate if we can move the votes in the Republican Senate. And if we can't move them, we have to replace them. The only way to replace them is to tell people explicitly the Republican Party is the problem. So lead that horse right to the water, explicitly, naming them. And then, I can't see the clock because there's like a big bright light, but I know I'm coming out of time. So I want to ask you guys this, and I ask my rooms this all the time. What is the one issue that Republicans don't want to talk about in 2024? There you go. It's abortion, guys. They're telling you their weakest spot, okay? They want us to go talk about immigration and explain actually there was a comprehensive border bill, because they understand no one will ever see that shit, okay? No one's ever gonna read the news. No one's ever gonna see Biden's record. They want us to do that, and what we should be doing is resisting that temptation and forcing them on defense by talking about the one thing that they know is political kryptonite to them. And it's kryptonite everywhere, because if they win, they're going to ban abortion nationally. So you aren't safe in Washington, you aren't safe in California. Imagine, by the way, going through the next 4 months in Arkansas or Alabama or Texas, right? Or Louisiana. Like, whatever happens if he wins, to us in the Northwest will pale in comparison to what our friends are going to face in those states, right? So the moment to make the strategic pivot was a while ago. Now we're at 1 second to midnight, okay? And so I urge you, if you're uncomfortable being mean and calling people an extremist, don't run for office right now, please, okay? Because people are going to die if we do not win, right? So, if you're uncomfortable doing that, what I tell people is think about this. Think about 1 year from now when they're rounding up all the immigrants. Are you going to be uncomfortable now, or are you going to be more uncomfortable when you have to make a decision? Should I hide my neighbor in my basement even though I'm risking jail or worse to do so? Okay, that is going to be stressful. That is going to be exhausting. We have everything we need to win. The only people that can stop us from saving democracy this time are us, okay? And so I need you guys, I know you're tired. I'm tired. My God, am I tired, right? But we can't give in to the fatigue. That fatigue is by design. It is designed to make us weak. And now is the time to dig deep and to really power through. And we got to remember, when Republicans go low, and they can't go lower, okay? They're calling us pedophiles and groomers. They can't go lower. We have to hit them where it hurts. Thank you. Do I take questions? Okay, well, there's a microphone there, and I'm just going to ask you guys, please, let's keep the questions specific to electioneering, to 2024, stuff I can help you with.
My name is Azim Underwood, Azim the Dream. My question is, when you update your graphs, are you going to show us how many Republicans voted for a convicted felon?
Yes, I will show you guys that, hopefully not from Canada in exile, okay? And I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be 96% of Republicans and those who lean Republican will vote for a convicted felon. That's what it's going to be. They did it for Roy Moore down in Alabama, known child pedophile, right? They did it for Herschel Walker, who I've already kind of illustrated. It will be 96%. If you're hoping for some surge of democracy where the American public shows up and rejects Trumpism, I'm here to tell you that will not happen. It is going to come down to 6 or 7 states and 100,000 votes. So and there's nothing I can do to relieve that stress for you. I know people want me to say something else. It's a toss-up. It's going to be a toss-up all the way through. And at the end of the day, about 60-something million Americans are going to vote for fascism. Is he next? Oh, yeah, there we go.
Hey. So I think, first of all, thank you. I think your message, really resonates, and especially your vulnerability in sharing that, like, our two-party system may not necessarily be working to our advantage anymore, right? Like, This is an election to save democracy on multiple dimensions, especially when, for some crazy reason, our elections come down to a fraction of a percent.
Right.
Like, nobody could have predicted this, right? And that warrants...
Yeah, no poll can measure a 1-point victory. It's got a margin of error of 3. And so all the poll can tell you is a race is one way or the other, or it's a toss-up. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. So it almost invites this distrust in our system, right? So then how do we kind of weaponize that, to our advantage? And, I'm curious, since, the average voter is not informed or engaged, as you mentioned, and for this informed voter group, and I realize this may be a little controversial, but kind of getting away from the old strategy and waging the current electoral war that you're stating, what's your perspective on line item voting? And I'll give you an example. Like, are we just going to vote D all the way down, or are we going to take into account all the various aspects of what we're being told, or even like thinking of how to play chess versus checkers? Because going back to 2012, knowing what I know now, I may have voted for Romney just to avoid this crazy person, this psychotic who is going to introduce a potential dictator and destroy our democracy. So how do we start playing chess versus checkers to wage a new front in this electoral war?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, yes, you're going to vote on the party label, right? So maybe you won't. Maybe my mother-in-law is one of these people. She'll go and look at actually the websites and the positions of people. But as I just, informed you guys, that's not how average people are going to do it. And that's why, if you guys ever wondered why nobody votes in primaries, right? Do you want to know why nobody votes in primaries? because there's no heuristic. You get a ballot with 6 names. There's no D or R. So if you want to make an educated vote, you have to look up and decide. So you know what name, that's why people who are famous are going to always have an advantage because they are known. So if I walk in a ballot and there's 6 names and there's one I recognize, I'm going to vote for that one, right? So the answer to your question, and I don't know, I feel like you're kind of leaning towards like, why can't we get off this 2-party model? In reality, it's because of the Electoral College. The Electoral College means Ross Perot got 19% of the vote in 1996. 19, I mean, that's humongous for third-party voting. 0 Electoral College votes, okay? So the Electoral College, even though that's at the presidential level, is really what structures that 2-party system. All righty.
Hi, thank you so much. This was so fascinating. My name's Mary Beckler. I'm actually running for Congress in the 4th Congressional District.
Yay!
And I was kind of brave against all advice. I put as my number 1 thing climate change and number 2 women's right for reproductive freedom. So I will switch that. But
I like it.
I'll start working on the website right now. But you said one thing. You said run on 3 things: run on freedom, democracy, and what was the 3rd thing?
MAGA extremism, making sure people think the word Republican and scary should connect. Right? And right now that does not happen.
And that's the 4th Congressional District.
Cool. Thanks. Nice to meet you. Hi.
Hi. So first of all, could we get copies of your slides? Because they're really good information there.
So I am doing a training. I don't tend to release this because I do like 80% of my work pro bono, and I am very poor. So.
But if we buy your book,
but the
I bet
book
they're in there.
covers all of this, yes. And by the way, I neglected to mention, and I definitely should while you're still in here, next door they're selling the book, and I'm going to sign it. I'm going to go over there. I'd like you to come over and meet me. Even if you're not going to get a book, that's fine, or you already have one. Don't let that stop. You come over, and while you're there, please look at the other books too, and see what people are producing that you might be interested in.
Okay, my real question was, okay, how do we avoid wasting our time with those independents who are not going to listen to what we have to say?
Well, I mean, the independents are the most important people, right? And do you guys have party reg up here, or is it? No. Okay, so campaign people will tell you that there's a voter system file thing called the VAN. And, you know, it scores people in nonpartisan states. So you have a sense of like who's an independent, who's a strong Democrat, who's a Republican, right? And so, you know, within that independent pool, what I'm telling you is you need to blanket that pool, and you need to blanket it with a message. They're coming for you, okay? Not they're coming for other people, because we care about other people. There's a bell curve of human stuff, right? We are on the tails of empathy. We're atypically empathetic. We're atypically collectivized in our thinking. No one else is, okay? Most people are very in-group, out-group oriented. So when I say we've been making liberal messages for liberals by liberals, this is what I mean. What we should be doing is telling people, not they're coming for others, they're coming for you. So in Washington State, it's not, hey, Washington State, you need to vote because people in Alabama are going to die. What I want to tell you is, hey, Washington State, you better vote because they're going to have a national abortion ban and they're going to come for you, right? So it's individualized, right? And we have done a very good job of pretending we're psychologically special. When I first started this work, I'd come to a meeting and someone would say, well, we just had somebody last week who said that negative ads don't work on swing voters. And I'm like, really? Well, then why in the hell is Ron DeSantis sitting in the Florida governorship? Okay, because he didn't run any of the messaging. He ran one message. Charlie Crist is a socialist who's gonna, you know, whatever, right? And so, like, this idea that we're special, we're still humans. We still have in-group, out-group. We're more collective, but we're still individuals. So we have to make sure that we're making messages psychologically that resonate with regular people. Oh, last question. Wait, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to flip back and forth. I'm so sorry. Don't let me down.
Oh, I'm not.
Dude, don't let me down.
All right.
All right.
So, what do you have to say to people that are progressives like myself that do start to tune into politics and then unfortunately do see that Democrats are the ones that are voting against their own platform sometimes?
Well, I mean, when you say voting against their own platform,
Like Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, as far as
yes, yeah.
or the other 8 Democrats that did vote against the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema.
Right.
Even there are a couple people here in the state that.
Yeah,
have
I would say
values.
it is misperceptions that come back to electioneering that dictate some of those vote decisions. Now, Kristen Sinema's an interesting cat, okay? It's like there's nothing she did that makes sense strategically. Joe Manchin, on the other hand, he's the last Democrat that's ever gonna serve. As you guys turned blue, right, the South turned red. And Joe Manchin is the last Democrat that will ever win a statewide race, only, maybe for 50 years, not necessarily forever, but for a long time. Democrats are dead there. His state went 73% Trump, right? And he was trying to maintain some electability, which I would have told him was pointless because he voted to impeach Donald Trump. And as soon as he did that, he was a dead man walking politically, right? So one of the best parts about shifting strategically, I'm not telling you guys, go run on niche issues that 10% of people support. And frankly, some of our base stuff is like that, okay? Like, I'm talking about guns and climate and abortion. These are issues that are polling 70, 80%. And we need our swing candidates to recognize that if you vote yes on minimum wage, it's a political asset, not a liability. Right? And so I do think that the strategic shift we're making in terms of electioneering is particularly powerful in terms of giving these senators the sense that politicians are just rational people, right? The first lesson we learn in poli-sci. Elected politicians are single-minded seekers of re-election or promotion. So it's not that they don't have ideology or proximate goals. They do. But they can't achieve any of their goals unless they win and stay in office, right? So their behavior is entirely dictated by that. And the people who frustrate you almost certainly are frustrating you because they face a competitive election. And when you do not face a competitive election, you are free to do whatever, okay? And if it's a heavy Dem place, you are much more liberty position-wise and policy-wise. So a lot of times people think it's like a sincere, and I'm like, no. The difference between an AOC and a John Fetterman is the electorate, not the politician. Okay. Come see me over in that next room. I'm so excited to meet you all, and thank you so much for having me.